Duke, he begun to abuse him for an old fool, and the king began to sass back. And the minute they was fairly at it, I lit out and shook the reefs out of my hind legs and spun down the river road like a deer, for I see our chance. And I made up my mind that it would be a long day before they ever see me and Jim again. I got down there all out of breath, but loaded up with joy and sung out, "Set her loose, Jim. We're all right now." But there weren't no answer. And nobody come out of the wigwam. Jim was gone. I set up a shout, and then another one, and run this way and that in the woods, whooping and screeching. But it warn't no use. Old Jim was gone. Then I sat down and cried. I couldn't help it. I couldn't sit still long. Pretty soon I went out on the road trying to think what I better do, and I run across a boy walking and asked him if he had seen a strange nigger dressed so-and-so, and he says, "Yes." "Whereabouts?" says I. "Down the side of this Phelps's place, 2 miles below here. He's a runaway nigger, and they've got him. Was you looking for him?" "You bet I ain't. I run across him in the woods about an hour or two ago, and he said if I hollered, he'd cut my livers out, and told me to lay down and stay where I was, and I done it. Been there ever since, afeared to come out." "Well," he says, "you need be afeared no more, because they've got him. He run off 'em down south somewheres." "It's a good job they got him." "Well, I reckon. There's $200 reward on him. It's like picking up money out on the road." "Yes, it is. And I could have had it if I'd been big enough. I see him first." "Who nailed him?" "It was an old fella, a stranger, and he sold out his chance in him for $40 because he's got to go up the river and can't wait. Think of that now. You bet I'd wait if it was 7 year." "Well, that's me every time," says I. "But maybe his chance ain't worth no more than that, if he'll sell it so cheap. Maybe there's something ain't straight about it." "But it is, though. Straight as a string. I see the handbill myself. It tells all about him to a dot. Paints him like a picture. And tells the plantation he's from, below New Orleans. No sirree, Bob. They ain't no trouble about that speculation, you bet you. Say, give me a chod tobacco, won't you?" I didn't have none, so he left. I went to the raft and sat down in the wigwam to think, but I couldn't come to nothing. I thought till I wore my head sore, but I couldn't see no way out of the trouble. After all this long journey, and after all we had done for them scoundrels, here it was all come to nothing. Everything all busted up and ruined, because they could have the heart to serve Jim such a trick as that and make him a slave again all his life, and among strangers, too, for $40 dirty dollars. Once I said to myself it would be 1,000 times better for Jim to be a slave at home where his family was, as long as he'd got to be a slave. And so I'd better write a letter to Tom Sawyer and tell him to tell Miss Watson where he was. I soon give up that notion for 2 things. She'd be mad and disgusted at his rascality and ungratefulness for leaving her, and so she'd sell him straight down the river again. And if she didn't, everybody naturally despises an ungrateful nigger, and they'd make Jim feel it all the time, and so he'd feel ornery and disgraced. And then think of me. It would get all around that Huck Finn helped the nigger to get his freedom. And if I was ever to see anybody from that town again, I'd be ready to get down and lick his boots for shame. That's just the way. A person does a low-down thing, and then he don't want to take no consequences of it. Thinks as long as he can hide, it ain't no disgrace. Well, that was my fix exactly. The more I studied about this, the more my conscience went to grinding me, and the more wicked and low down and ornery I got to feeling. And at last, when it hit me all of a sudden that here was the plain hand of Providence slapping me in the face and letting me know my wickedness was being watched all the time from up there in heaven, whilst I was stealing a poor old woman's nigger that had never done me no harm, and now was showing me there's one that's always on the lookout and ain't a-gonna allow no such miserable doings to go only just so far and no further, I almost dropped in my tracks. I was so scared. Well, I tried the best I could to kind of soften it up somehow for myself by saying I was brung up wicked, and so I weren't so much to blame. Something inside of me kept saying, there was the Sunday school, you could have gone to it, and if you'd have done it, they'd alert you there that people that acts as I've been acting about that nigger goes to everlasting fire. It made me shiver, and I about made up my mind to pray and see if I couldn't try to quit being the kind of boy I was and be better. So I kneeled down, but the words wouldn't come. Why wouldn't they? It wasn't no use to try and hide it from him, nor from me neither. I knowed very well why they wouldn't come. It was because my heart weren't right. It was because I weren't square. It was because I was playing double. I was letting on to give up sin, but way inside of me I was holding on to the biggest one of all. I was trying to make my mouth say I would do the right thing and the clean thing and go right to that nigger's owner and tell where he was. But deep down in me, I knowed it was a lie. And he knowed it. You can't pray a lie. I found that out. So I was full of trouble, full as I could be, and didn't know what to do. At last I had an idea. And I says, I'll go and write the letter, and then see if I can pray. Why, it was astonishing the way I felt as light as a feather right straight off, and my troubles all gone. So I got a piece of paper and a pencil, all glad and excited, and sat down and wrote, Miss Watson, your runaway nigger Jim is down here 2 miles below Pikesville, and Mr. Phelps has got him, and he will give him up for the reward if you send. Huck Finn. I felt good and all washed clean of sin for the first time I'd ever felt so in my life, and I knowed I could pray now. But I didn't do it straight off, but laid the paper down and sat there thinking how good it was all this happened so, and how near I come to being lost and going to hell. And went on thinking, and got to thinking over our trip down the river. And I see Jim before me all the time, in the day and in the nighttime, sometimes moonlight, sometimes storms, and we floating along, talking and singing and laughing. Somehow I couldn't seem to strike no places to harden me against him, but only the other kind. I'd see him standing my watch on top of his'n, instead of calling me, so I could go on sleeping. And see him how glad he was when I come back out of the fog, and when I come to him again in the swamp up there where the feud was, at such like times, and would always call me honey, and pet me, and do everything he could think of for me, and how good he always was. And at last I struck the time I saved him by telling the men we had smallpox aboard, and he was so grateful and said I was the best friend old Jim ever had in the world, and the only one he's got now. And then I happened to look around and see that paper. It was a close place. I took it up and held it in my hand. I was a-trembling because I'd got to decide forever betwixt 2 things, and I knowed it. I studied a minute, sort of holding my breath, and then says to myself, all right then, I'll go to hell, and tore it up. It was awful thoughts and awful words, but they was said, and I let them stay said, and never thought no more about reforming. I shoved the whole thing out of my head and said I would take up wickedness again, which was in my line, being brung up to it, and the other warn't. And for a starter, I would go to work and steal Jim out of slavery again. And if I could think up anything worse, I would do that too, because as long as I was in and in for good, I might as well go the whole hog.